Have you ever wondered about the name Jesus? It's recognized in every corner of the globe, spoken in prayers, carved into stone, and called out in moments of hope and crisis. But what if I told you that for the first few centuries of the faith, no one knew him by that name? And what if the reason his name was changed has nothing to do with a conspiracy, but everything to do with a fascinating journey of language, culture, and a message so powerful it had to break free of its mother tongue to reach the world? In this video, we're peeling back 2,000 years of history to trace the path from his original name and reveal why it was changed. And you'll see, he isn't the only biblical figure whose identity was transformed by translation. This is the story of how Yeshua became Jesus. The original name, a name above all names. To get this, we have to go back, way back. We're in 1st century Judea, a land under Roman rule, but whose people were fiercely, culturally Hebrew. In this world, a name wasn't just a label you were given. It was a prophecy, a piece of your character, a carrier of your destiny. A name had power. The man we know as Jesus was born a Jew to a Jewish mother in a Jewish town. So his friends, his family, his disciples, they all would have called him by his given Hebrew name, Yeshua. Now, Yeshua was a pretty common name for Jewish men back then. Archaeologists have found it was actually one of the most popular names in that area. But it was anything but ordinary. The name Yeshua is a shorter version of a much older Hebrew name, Yehoshua. If that rings a bell, it should. It's the Hebrew name of the Old Testament hero we know as Joshua, the one who led the Israelites into the Promised Land. And the meaning is profound. Both Yehoshua and its shorter form, Yeshua, mean Yahweh is salvation, or the Lord saves. His very name was a mission statement. An angel told his earthly father, Joseph, "You shall call his name Yeshua, for he will save his people from their sins." This wasn't a coincidence. It was a divine purpose, packed right into the syllables of his name. Imagine hearing that name in its original setting. For a people waiting for a Messiah, a Savior, the name Yeshua would have hit with incredible force. It wasn't just a name. It was the fulfillment of a promise, a living declaration that God's salvation was here. So, if his name was Yeshua, and it carried so much theological weight, why do billions today know him by a completely different name? The answer lies in what happened next, as the message of Yeshua started to cross borders. The first transformation, from Hebrew to Greek. The story of Yeshua didn't stay put in the Hebrew and Aramaic-speaking world. After his death and resurrection, his followers felt a calling to spread his teachings to all nations. They traveled throughout the Roman Empire, a massive, multicultural world where the language of trade, culture, and new ideas wasn't Hebrew. It was Koine Greek. This is where the first big change happens. The New Testament, the very documents that would tell his story, were written in Greek. And the authors faced a problem. How do you write a Hebrew name with Hebrew sounds for people who speak and read Greek? You can't just translate a name. You have to transliterate it, which means you try to remake the sounds of a word from one language using the letters of another. And this is where Greek grammar threw a couple of wrenches in the works. The Hebrew name, Yeshua, Yeshvi, starts with a Y sound. It has a Esh sound in the middle, and it ends with an A sound. Well, ancient Greek had no letter for the Esh sound. The closest they could get was a simple S sound, the Greek letter sigma. So, the Esh in Yeshua had to become an S. The second issue was the ending. In Greek, masculine names almost always ended with an S to be grammatically correct. Think of Socrates, Archimedes, Herodotus. A man's name ending with an A, like Yeshua, would have sounded strange, or even feminine, to a Greek speaker. So, the New Testament writers did their best. The Y sound from the Hebrew became the Greek letter iota, I. The vowel sounds were matched as closely as possible. The esh sound became a sigma, S. And, to make it a proper masculine name, they added another sigma, S, at the end. Put it all together, and the Hebrew Yeshua, YSHVB, became the Greek Iesous, which is pronounced something like Jesus, Ye-I-Sus. This wasn't a plot to erase his Jewish identity. It was a practical solution. We know this because they did the exact same thing with other Hebrew names centuries earlier when translating the Old Testament into Greek. The name of Moses' successor, Yehoshua, was also written as Jesus in Greek. It was just the established way of doing things. For hundreds of years, as Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, this was the name everyone knew, Jesus. But the name's journey wasn't over yet. As the Roman Empire's influence grew, so did the influence of its language, Latin. While Greek was the language of scholars in the East, Latin became the language of law, government, and eventually, the Western Church. In the late 4th century, a scholar named Jerome was given a huge job: translate the entire Bible from its original Greek and Hebrew into one standard Latin version. This masterpiece would be known as the Vulgate, and it became the foundational text for Western Christianity for more than 1,000 years. When Jerome came across the Greek name Jesus, his job was much easier than the first translators. Latin and Greek were much more similar phonetically. He simply took the Greek Jesus and adapted it to the Latin alphabet. The Greek letters were swapped for their nearly identical Latin versions. And so, Iesu became Iesus. The pronunciation was almost exactly the same as the Greek. In classical Latin, the letter I made both a vowel I sound and a consonant Y sound. So, Jesus was pronounced roughly Jesus, keeping the original sound alive. For the next 1,000 years, through the fall of Rome and the entire Middle Ages, Jesus was the name used in every church, monastery, and scriptorium in Western Europe. It was chanted by monks and invoked by kings. The sound had stayed remarkably consistent all the way from Greek to Latin. But the way the name was written held a secret that would lead to the final change we all recognize today: the invention of the letter J. Here's the part of the story that surprises almost everyone. The letter J that you use to spell Jesus, it didn't exist in its modern form for the first 1,500 years of Christianity. The English alphabet wasn't set in stone. It evolved. For centuries, in Latin and early English, the letter I did double duty. It was used for the vowel I, like in igloo, and the consonant Y, like in yes. So the name Jesus started with that consonant Y sound. Then, in the Middle Ages, scribes started adding a little tail to the letter I when it appeared at the beginning of a word, just as a stylistic flourish to tell it apart from a vowel I. This curvy I looked like a J. For a long time, I and J were used interchangeably, and they both made the Y sound. If you look at the first edition of the King James Bible, printed in 1611, there is no letter J. The name is spelled Iesus. Places we know as Jerusalem and Judah are spelled Ierusalem and Judah. So when did it all change? The idea of I and J being separate letters with totally different sounds only started to catch on in the English language in the 17th century. The sound of J shifted, influenced by French, to become the hard Jew sound we know today in words like judge or joy. As printers standardized English spelling, they began using the new letter J for this new Jewish sound. Over time, the way we said words that started with the written J changed to match the new sound of the letter, and that's exactly what happened to the name Jesus. As the name became more common in English, the original Y sound, which had been faithfully kept for over 1,600 years from Hebrew to Greek to Latin, was finally replaced. The written Jesus became Jesus, and the pronunciation shifted from Jesus to the modern Jesus. This final change wasn't the result of a theological debate. It was the natural, messy, fascinating evolution of the English language itself. It's pretty amazing that the invention of a single letter could change the most well-known name in the world. If you're finding this dive into history and language fascinating, go ahead and subscribe and click the bell. We explore stories like this every week, uncovering the forgotten history that has shaped our world. Your support lets us keep this journey of discovery going, unraveling the myths, conspiracy, and misinformation. Whenever a story involves changing something as sacred as Jesus' name, it's bound to stir up questions and even suspicion. This linguistic journey has been twisted into all sorts of myths and conspiracy theories. And it's worth setting the record straight, because the truth is way more compelling. One of the most popular theories is that the name Jesus is a pagan invention, created to secretly honor the Greek god Zeus. The idea is that changing Yeshua to Isus was a plot to cut the Messiah off from his Jewish roots and make him more acceptable to pagans. It's a juicy story, but it just doesn't hold up linguistically. The switch from Yeshua to Iesus was a logical process based on the sounds available in the Greek language. The Sus ending has absolutely no connection to Zeus. It was a standard grammatical ending for men's names in Greek. Claiming there's a link ignores all the linguistic evidence and the clear patterns used for tons of other Hebrew names. Another common argument is that if we don't use the original name, Yeshua, we are praying to the wrong person. This idea usually comes from a good place, a desire for authenticity, but it misunderstands how language works. The name Jesus in English, Jesus in Spanish, Jesu in Italian, and Yeshua in Hebrew are all pointers to the same person. According to Christian theology, the power isn't in the specific phonetic sounds, but in the person the name identifies, the Son of God, the Savior. The Bible itself argues against this kind of linguistic purism. On the day of Pentecost, the disciples were miraculously able to speak in many different languages, declaring God's wonders to people from all over the world. The message was instantly translated. The focus was on the message being understood, not on preserving the exact Hebrew or Aramaic sounds. The transformation from Yeshua to Jesus wasn't a plot, it was a process. And it's a powerful example of how a message born in a tiny corner of the Middle East could adapt and embed itself into cultures all over the world. The story of how Yeshua's name evolved is actually part of a much bigger biblical theme. Time and time again in the Old and New Testaments, a name change signals a huge moment of divine intervention, a total shift in a person's identity and destiny. And this pattern is everywhere once you look for it. Think about the patriarch Abram. His name meant exalted father. But God made a promise to him, a covenant, that he would be the father of countless nations. To mark this incredible promise, God changed his name. In Genesis, God says, "No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations." His new name, Abraham, literally means father of a multitude. At the same time, his wife Sarai, my princess, became Sarah, princess, marking her new role as a mother of nations. Then there's his grandson, Jacob. His name meant supplanter or deceiver, which fit his early manipulative character. But after wrestling all night with a divine being, he is a changed man. The being tells him, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed." His new name, Israel, means he who struggles with God, and it would become the name for the entire nation descended from him. The pattern explodes in the New Testament. The clearest example is a fisherman named Simon. When Jesus calls him as a disciple, he gives him a new name on the spot. Jesus looks at him and says, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which the text explains is translated as Peter. Both words mean rock. This wasn't random. It was a prophecy. This impulsive fisherman would become a foundational rock for the early church. His new name was a call to a new identity. And maybe the most stunning change of all is Saul of Tarsus. Saul was a religious fanatic, violently persecuting the first Christians. But after being blinded by an encounter with the risen Christ, his life is turned upside down. He goes from being the church's greatest enemy to its greatest champion. To mark this complete reversal from a persecutor of non-Jews to the apostle to the Gentiles, he becomes known by his Roman name, Paul. In every case, the name change isn't just cosmetic, it's theological. It announces a new reality, a new purpose given by God. It shows that in the biblical worldview, your identity can be redefined and redeemed by a divine calling. So what's the shocking truth? Was there some secret committee that voted to change his name? Not at all. The real story is so much better. The journey from Yeshua to Jesus is a 2,000-year story of history, linguistics, and the spread of an idea. It started as a Hebrew name packed with meaning, Yeshua, the Lord saves. It had to be transliterated into Greek as Jesus so a wider world could hear it. It was then adopted into Latin as Jesus, the standard for 1,000 years. And finally, it settled into its English form, Jesus, thanks to the invention of the letter J. The change wasn't meant to hide his identity, but to broadcast it. It's a stunning example of how a message can break out of its home culture and language to become global. And as we've seen, this idea of transformation is a theme woven all through the Bible. Just as Abram became Abraham and Simon became Peter, the evolution of the name itself reflects the core message, a truth meant for every tribe and every tongue. Ultimately, the power was never in the exact pronunciation, but in the person the name has always pointed to. If this story sparked your curiosity, I invite you to subscribe and join the conversation. And I want to ask you, after hearing this history, what does the name Jesus or Yeshua mean to you now? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.